Hey everyone, welcome back to another Permaslug episode. My name is Jonathan, and today what I'm going to do is walk you through Cloudways in detail and tell you a bit about why I'm such a big fan of Cloudways as my host. Now, I should start off by telling you that I have a lot of hosting experience. I've been through every host you can name, everybody from GoDaddy to InMotion, Bluehost, DreamHost, SiteGround, pretty much anybody you can name, I've probably tried them out over the years. As you can see on your screen, I do have a couple of servers on Cloudways, one of which I've had for just over 2 years, as it turns out. And I've been really happy with them all the way through. Cloudways gives me the exact level of control that I want, but not too much to where I'm having to manage every intricate detail of my server. Yes, you do pay a bit more through a company like Cloudways as compared to if you went straight to the company like Vultr or Google Cloud or whoever, but there's a lot of stuff that Cloudways adds on top that those other kind of self-service platforms wouldn't, give you right out of the box. So to me, Cloudways is a fantastic value. And you can see that little orange number to the right on the right side of the server panel tells you how many apps I have kind of spread out across these servers. So my management client server is for those that have low traffic but are paying on a monthly basis to be hosted. You can see 10 websites on a 2 gigabyte server, and that thing never blinks. It is more than sufficient. The development server, I do have a couple of really large sites under development on that server, so that's why that's set to a 4 gig. And there is 25 sites across that. Some actually aren't even in, development anymore. They're actually live and I just haven't cleaned it up. The internal project server is simply for me, just some kind of basic testing sites. A few of those are actually live sites, but they get very little traffic. So you can see I only have 5 websites on that. And then my main server down at the bottom is Apex Vultr Atlanta. That server is my heftiest one at 8 gigs, and I'll explain what all that stuff means later on. But that has 51 sites, some of which are staging, so I would say in terms of live actual sites, it's probably more like 35. And a few of them do get good traffic, like the Permaslug website and a couple of client sites. And again, that server never really drops below 50% resource usage. And I'm not really selling people on the idea of having like the absolute top, perfection in terms of speed and performance. Because of the fact that most of these clients don't need it. They're just standard small business sites. You do a decent bit of optimization and it takes them a long way when that's paired with a decent host like Cloudways. So what we're going to do here is actually go ahead and deploy a server, set up a WordPress install, add a domain, and go through some of the nuances of why I think Cloudways is just such a good fit for agencies and freelancers. I want to make sure you guys are aware this is not a sponsored video. Cloudways was kind enough to add some hosting credits to my account so that I could add a server and an app on a real environment and actually show you what it would act like in the real world. But other than that, I'm not being paid to make this video. I do have my affiliate link in the description box in this video, so if you want to check it out, I would certainly appreciate that. But again, this is not a sponsored video. So let's go ahead and click on this Add Server button, and this is what it's going to look like when you first set up your account. Now, if you've seen my earlier Cloudways hosting review from about a year or a year and a half ago, I actually, this screen is going to look quite a bit different. A lot of these servers have changed. So let's go through this real quick. The first thing you have to do is select your first application you're going to have on the site. And in our case, it's more than likely going to be WordPress. If you wanted to have just like a blank hosting environment that you could FTP into and throw some basic HTML files on, you would just do this PHP custom app right here. In my case, I'm just going to go ahead and choose WordPress, and then we need to name this managed app, so we can just call this test WP install. Name our managed server, we're going to call this Permaslug review server, something like that. And then it asks you to select a project, which is not really something I do. You can see there's this projects tab up here. It doesn't really sort in the way that I wish it would. I wish that you could go to the projects tab and it only showed you apps and servers that were in that project, but unfortunately it doesn't quite work like that. So the next thing that you have to do is pick your server provider. So you can see some of these are probably going to look pretty familiar, like DigitalOcean, AWS, and Google Cloud are obviously pretty ubiquitous names in this kind of arena. All the servers that I have, you can see, were Vultr servers. And the reason why I switched to Vultr was because I used to have Google Cloud, and it was fantastic. It was really, really fast. The performance was great. I never had any issues whatsoever, except for the fact that on Google Cloud and on AWS, you'll notice that there's this little bandwidth slider here. So you are actually paying for bandwidth as well. So if you're concerned with the absolute kind of, top level performance, I would recommend going AWS or Google Cloud, whatever your preference is. And the other thing that these two give you that most of the others don't is the ability to scale your server up and down. So So you can see there's a ton of different server size options here. 96 virtual CPUs and 192 gigs of RAM at the top end, which I'm sure has an insane price tag. Yeah, look at that, $3,000 a month. But that, of course, doesn't account for the bandwidth and the storage capacity that you need to estimate. So let's take a look. A typical server like my 8 gig Vultr server pretty much lines up with this one right here, the Google Cloud In1 Standard 2. At its base cost, that is $138 a month before bandwidth. I think on average, I'm at like 300 gigs of bandwidth. Let's go roughly 300. And then storage, I don't know what I use. I think it comes with like, I don't know, 4 terabytes or something insane. But let's just say 200 gigs. Database size, I don't think is very big. Let's go like 20 gigs. And so you can see that server would cost you about $207 a month. So that's totally realistic, especially if you have quite a few sites on there. All your clients are paying you for hosting. That's a price that's totally manageable. It does change price slightly depending on what data center you choose. You can see in Northern Virginia it's more expensive. Perhaps that's a faster, better, more connected data center. Not really too sure. But that's about all the options. So if you were ready to launch this, you could go ahead and hit launch. I mentioned that I personally use Vultr. One thing that is new to Cloudways that I haven't explored just yet is the standard and then the high frequency computing platforms. So it says high frequency instances are powered by high clock speed CPUs and NVMe local storage. That's pretty cool. The standard ones I do believe are SSD, but I would assume they're SATA SSDs and not NVMe. So that's pretty cool. The reason why I ended up going with Vultr is because you're basically allotted a certain number of resources across the board, just basically depending on your server size. So earlier I was referring to the servers as 1 gig, 4 gig, 8 gig, etc. And that's because that's more or less how they're situated here in the back end of Cloudways. So if I were to click on this 8 gig, you can see my price is $84 a month, which is pretty accurate, except that you are charged a little bit extra for offsite backups, which are not terribly expensive. I want to say my $84 a month server ends up costing me like $88 a month, or maybe a little bit more, maybe more like $90 a month with the offsite backups, which I'll show you later on as well. Now, if I hover over this, you can see what all of this comes with. So 8 gigs of RAM, 160 gig SSD, 4 terabytes of bandwidth each month, and a 4-core processor. So it's not quite comparable to the Google Cloud platform, but this is what I moved to from that Google Cloud In1 Standard 2. So that was about $138 a month, and the Vultr server of 8 gigs is about $80 or $90 a month. So they're fairly reasonably close. I was just always afraid that a client was going to have a big traffic spike and I would be responsible for footing that bill. And that wasn't really something I had worked into my contracts to cover, potential bandwidth spikes. The other thing about Vultr is the locations. You'll notice there's a lot more of those. So I live in Florida, in the panhandle of Florida, so it made more sense for me to choose Atlanta rather than Miami. Most of my clients are kind of in the Alabama, Georgia, Florida area, so it made more sense to be in Atlanta, like I said. But you can see there's tons of them. So all over the EU, looks like Frankfurt. Apparently you can't have an 8 gig server in Frankfurt right now for some reason. A bunch in Asia Pacific, so you can see you have a lot of options there. Now, one thing I mentioned is that you can scale your servers up and down on AWS and Google Cloud, but in Vultr, as far as I'm aware, that's still not available. You can scale the servers up, but you can't scale it back down. If you want to go back down, you have to deploy a second server, change over all your apps, and then that would require you to change the DNS for all those sites because the IP is going to change. So if you want vertical scaling up and down, you pretty much absolutely have to use AWS or Google Cloud. These other providers, I'm not sure if they allow vertical scaling up and down, but I'm fairly certain the answer to that question is no. So just keep that in mind. I pretty much don't find that I need to scale my servers up. More what I'm doing is deploying a second server because I started to feel like I wanted my sites to be more split up across different servers. Maybe that has no impact because they're in the same data center, but it just gave me better peace of mind knowing that there were different sites across different servers for a little bit better reliability, in my opinion. So in this case, for what I want to deploy, I'm actually going to try the high frequency server, and then let's jump up to like the 2 gig server. That does add a little bit of cost. Let's go to the 8 gig here. So that's $100 a month instead of 88 or 84, I think is what it actually was. But it says that it gives you, it actually gives you more SSD disk and an additional processor core, which is pretty cool. So let's go ahead and give this a shot. I'm just going to do the 2 gig one, and then let's choose a different data center. So everything I have is in Atlanta. Let's go with Chicago, just see what our performance looks like. So now we have our app chosen, we have our server and our app named, we picked out the server size and the provider that we want, and we chose our data center. So I'm going to go ahead and click on launch now. So this server is going to take a few minutes to deploy, so I'm going to go ahead and just leave this here, and then I'll come back whenever it's ready to go. Okay, so you can see that the server is deployed and ready to go. It's got this green light next to it. Shows our new IP address here and then also the creation date. If we click on this little www, it shows you all of the applications that live on that server, which is pretty cool. This is the one that we named in the server setup screen, so it already added the WordPress install for us. I wanted to touch on these three little dots right here. So you have all these other options right here. Stop and restart, delete are pretty self-explanatory. You can add an application straight to this server. And we're going to deploy another application so you can see what that looks like. Transfer server means transfer it to a whole new Cloudways account, which is pretty cool. You just pop in their email and there's a couple other steps and then that's done. Clone server, of course, would mean that you could clone it to an entirely new provider if you chose to, which is pretty awesome. And what I want to do now is go ahead and just actually click on the server and let's take a look at some of the server settings in the back end. So on this master credentials screen, the first thing that you can see here is the IP address, the username for kind of the main master SFTP credentials, and then also the password for that. What's cool about this is then you could save this master credentials information, pop it into something like FileZilla or whatever your FTP application of choice is, and then you can access all of the apps on this server through one FTP credentials. You can also create application-specific FTP, which is super awesome. I use that all the time when people need to get into the site. Other agencies or freelancers that maybe are taking over a site or perhaps need to do something, I can give them specific FTP credentials for one app, and then they can't touch anything else in the server, which is fantastic. You can also launch an SSH terminal in your browser, which is cool. That's pretty advanced and something that I typically don't do, but that is available there if you need it. The other thing you have is this monitoring tab. This is something that I take a peek at every once in a while, and there are automated notifications that you can set up depending on what you want. So like if server resources dip below a certain percentage or a certain number, then you can kind of take a look at that and see what you need to do. So the summary tab is pretty self-explanatory. You can see all kind of the main resource information that you would care about there. The details tab, this shows everything in more specific detail. You can check out free memory. The server, of course, hasn't been running very long, so this stuff isn't populated, but normally you would have graphs with lots of information here to kind of take a look at how your server is running in real time. The next tab here is the Manage Services button, and you can see these are all the standard services. So let's say you're having an issue with, Nginx or MySQL, you can restart that stuff from this screen right here. You can basically purge the whole varnish cache or disable it on the entire server. So like on a development server, you probably don't want the varnish caching, especially if you're working in Oxygen, because often what you'll see in the builder is not what you see in the front end, and that's typically down to the varnish cache that's built in. It is something that I use because it does help quite a bit, but of course, like I said, if you're in development, it can be very frustrating when you're trying to figure out why the heck the builder doesn't match the live, so just keep varnish in mind. Moving into the settings and packages screen, this has a lot of information and settings that you can modify that will make a big impact on your server. On the typical site that I'm building, which is for small businesses, 10, 15, 20 pages, I don't need to mess with any of these services across the server. Execution limit is typically fine. Upload size I leave pretty low because I don't want people uploading huge files. Memory limit, sometimes I'll bump to 256, but 128 is typically more than fine. You can go ahead and change your time zone if you want to. More what I care about is in the Packages tab, but let's take a look at the advanced screen here. So max input var, if you want to change that for like a WP all import script that you're running, you can change that. Sometimes you'll need to change max input time. You can see you can bump these numbers up as high as you want. So like 99,000 on both max input time and then also some of this other stuff too, like upload size. You can make it as high as you want. Execution limit as high as you want. There's really no reason to put it that high, but if you need to, it's certainly available. Switching over to the Packages tab on a new server, the first thing that I like to do is double check that the PHP is set to somewhere in the neighborhood of like 7234. And then also that MySQL is set to MariaDB instead of MySQL, because in WordPress and in Oxygen, it is much, much faster to use MariaDB instead of MySQL. I don't think it used to deploy this as default in the past when you set up a new server, but now it does because, of course, as you can see, I didn't actually end up changing it. It just is already set that way. So if I take a look here, you can see the PHP options I have. They do still give you 5.6 if you need it for old antiquated stuff. But I would prefer to, like it's already set, use 7.3. I like to be kind of one step behind the absolute latest to make sure everything works fine. In terms of MySQL, you can see the other options here. Actually, MySQL is gone completely. That's really interesting. I did not know that. I was going to mention that if you did still have that option, switching between MySQL, MariaDB versus MySQL on a live server can end up breaking your sites. So set it and leave it. Don't touch this. You want to do that very early on when you're setting up the server so you don't cause yourself a massive headache down the line. The other thing is Elasticsearch. To be perfectly honest, I don't use this, so I don't really know what it is. I'm just gonna go ahead and leave that. And then maintenance. This is you basically telling Cloudways when they can do kind of behind the scenes updates and maintenance to the server. I have never noticed any kind of interruption. So it says you may experience a minor interruption in service to your server or websites. That is, I guess, maybe sort of a disclaimer because they probably do occasionally have issues where things will go out. But I have never personally experienced any of that. So I just always leave the maintenance at, 1 UTC. That's perfectly fine with me. For the security side of things, there's all kinds of stuff in here that you can configure if you so choose. You can set up whitelist IPs, allow and block based on, all kinds of other rules. Same thing with your database. I don't really touch any of this stuff. So let's go ahead and jump into vertical scaling. This goes back to what I mentioned earlier, that you can scale the server up if you want to. So right now we have our 2 gig server. I could bump this up to a 4 gig server, or apparently I can't because this is a 4 gig server in Chicago. Can I do 8? No, I guess maybe 2 is the biggest that I can do in Chicago. In any case, you can bump them up, but you can't bump them back down. So right here, it says, note that vertical scaling on Vultr, you can only increase the server size, and that scaling down is only possible through the cloning feature. So what that means is what I explained earlier. You'd have to deploy a second server that's kind of that lower tier that you're after, copy all the applications over, and then change the IP address of all of those, on their DNS provider, because Cloudways doesn't offer a DNS service. And that could be a massive pain if you have a lot of sites. If I had to do that for more than just a few, that would be miserable because it's just such a manual effort. So just keep that in mind. Kind of pick the size that you think you want, stick with it, and then, if you really need that flexibility of up and down at any given time, choose AWS or Google Cloud. I was talking earlier when we were discussing pricing about the backups. So you can choose how often it takes server backups, at what time, how frequently, and also how long it keeps them. They do charge you for their offsite backup feature, but it's so little that I hardly even notice it. I'm honestly not entirely sure what the breakdown on price is, but it's so little that it's basically inconsequential to me. I just pay it. You do have the option to take local backups and download them via SFTP or something like that, but I typically just trust their offsite backup feature, and I have had to restore a couple of times and it worked just fine. Last but not least, on the server settings tab is this SMTP button. So this is for transactional email, like if somebody submits a contact form and it's going to give them a copy of it and shoot you the notification. This is what you need to turn on to make sure those emails are delivered reliably. If you have your own SMTP server, you can use that, but I typically just go for the Elastic email because it's so cheap. This is Cloudways kind of more or less white label email service. It's called like managed cloud hosting email.com, something like that. And it just works really beautifully. I don't have to configure anything in WordPress. I touch nothing in WordPress, no plugins. When I used to be on InMotion hosting, I would have to use something like WP SMTP Easy, WP SMTP, whatever that plugin was called. I'd have to go configure all my settings. Then I'd have to go test it, make sure it worked. But in Cloudways, I just pretty much don't have to worry about that. I just know it's going to work reliably. And I pretty much never have issues with, contact form notifications going to spam addresses. So Elastic Email is a really great tool. I highly recommend it. I want to say it's like $1 a month for like 10,000 emails or something. It's crazy cheap. So just use it. So that basically covers our server settings. Pretty much everything right out of the box is exactly what you would be after. I just wanted to walk you through what those options look like. Let's go back to our server tab here. And what I want to do from this point is just go look at that application that we deployed so you can kind of get a feel for what you can do to a given application. So this access details screen is of course for this application now and not the server that we were just looking at. So this gives you a little bit more info like the application URL, and Cloudways gives you a default URL that you can use to develop your sites on, which is pretty cool. This is pretty much always what I use. This is what I'll send a client, even though it doesn't look that great. It's just, it works perfectly fine. And I've never really had anybody kick that back as like a point of contention. It also gives you the admin information, so the WP admin URL, and then it also gives you the email attached to your Cloudways as kind of the primary username, and then the password to just deploy something random for you. The MySQL access, you have the database username and password there. And this is where I was talking about you can configure custom, SFTP credentials for this particular application. So this is filling in something from my LastPass here, but you can just basically make up a username, you can make up a password, just face roll on the keyboard. You can add that, and then once it's done, then you have SFTP credentials that are specific to this app that will only get you into this app's settings. What's really cool about these passwords is they're click to copy too, so I just face rolled on the keyboard and I didn't really care what that username actually was, but what did that password actually end up being? So that's what I made that password. So it's really nice. You can basically just use like an automatically generated password and not really worry about what it looks like. A relatively recent addition to the Cloudways backend is the monitoring tab for your application specifically, which is kind of cool. So you can see all of these different stats and logs and stuff, which the logs is extremely useful if you're having some sort of error you can't quite track down. The logs aren't super detailed, but it basically gives you the ability to look at the log without having to go, FTP in and try to dig for the log manually. So that's really nice. Bot protection is also something that's relatively new. This is just a simple turn on or off feature. It's not something I've explored in detail, but what I understand is that this is going to block all kinds of malicious activity. It's supposedly going to help you with bandwidth usage and also server resources because it's going to block malicious looking, traffic across the board. So you can just simply turn this on. Let's see what happens when I turn it on. Okay, so like I said, it's just as simple as a turn on and off kind of thing. So looks like it's going to block malicious logins, traffic from bad bots, all that kind of stuff. I'm curious how well this works, so perhaps I'll turn this on a real site and see how it works in the future. Moving into the next tab is the domain management. So this is where you're going to change this from your, given default URL here to whatever your actual live domain is. And this is something that I do right when I'm ready to take the site live. So like I said, I will develop the client site on this temporary URL. I'll share that with them, and then when they give me the thumbs up to make the site live, I'm going to go ahead and add in their domain. So let's go ahead and do this in real time. So over here in Google Domains, I have this domain that we can work with called formulameme.com. And you would basically, in whoever your domain provider is, you would go to your DNS tab. In Google Domains, we're going to scroll down here. We're not going to change name servers. We're just basically going to set up the A record and the CNAME record for www. So the first thing that we need to do is go over here to Cloudways, go to our Access Details tab, choose the IP. You can just click to copy it. We're going to come back over here. Our @ for our A record is going to point to the IP address of the server. Go ahead and click on Add. Then for our record here, we're going to type www, whoop, not 4, 3 times. CNAME, and then the domain name we're just going to point to @ like that. Simple as that. So now the www is going to forward to the non-www as our primary domain. So this should be pretty quick. What we can do is basically just take our domain here, go back over to Cloudways. Under the Domain Management tab, we're going to save that as our primary domain. Sometimes this does take just a moment. So now our application domain name has been updated. It's automatically going to redirect this to whatever our primary domain is set to now. So just to show you, if we switch over to the Access Details, you can see that this is all changed now to formulameme.com. If I open this, then this is still set as the WP site name, but you can see the domain is formulameme.com, which is pretty cool. I'm going to go ahead and close out of these two tabs and come back to the domain management screen. So you can delete this and change it, but the other thing that you can do rather than deleting it, the system changing it back to the temporary URL and then to whatever your new domain is, you can just basically add something new here. So if I had the domain changed to formulameme1.com, all I have to do is just save this and it's going to change it for me automatically. What's super cool about this is it handles everything for you in the WordPress backend. So you can see if I go ahead and switch back in, I don't have an SSL cert, not worried about that. Everything has been changed for you in the WordPress backend. Even the live stuff like in Oxygen, every URL across the site is changed pretty reliably. I pretty much never have issues with that function, forgetting to change a URL. That's also true if you have absolute URLs coded in. In most cases, it will change the absolute URL from whatever it was before to the new live domain name, which is super awesome. Cron job management is something I don't really use, but if you have cron jobs, you can add them in there. What I want to jump to now is the Ssl certificate. So of course, it does come with Let's Encrypt already set up, ready for you to utilize, which is what I do. You also have the option to install a custom SSL cert if you would like to. I am perfectly happy with Let's Encrypt. All you need to do is type in your email. So let's just go permislog@gmail.com. And then our domain name is formulameme.com. The other thing you need to do is add the www version, so formulameme.com. So that way, if somebody types in the www format or they get to it from some other website across the site, they don't get that scary, insecure warning. So what we would do now is just basically go ahead and click Install Cert. Hopefully our DNS is updated so it doesn't give us an error message. So now the SSL cert is installed and it's going to ask, do we want to turn on the HTTPS redirection, which I pretty much always do. This eliminates the need for working with the plugin like really simple SSL. This is going to handle all of the non-HTTP redirects for you. And it's also going to help you with like mixed content warnings on your site. So this makes it really good, especially if you do this early on. The temporary URLs that Cloudways gives you are HTTPS, so it does make it a lot more simple. But I normally just click on that enable HTTPS redirection and it works perfectly fine. So it confirms that it's now enabled for our site. We can just go ahead and click on close and you can disable it here from the application settings as you can see. If I jump back to the Access Details tab, once again, if I go to the WP admin, now we have the secure notification. We don't have that scary insecure warning, and everything is now going to be HTTPS across the site. As you can see here, we came to the front end, and now this is secure as well, which is super good. Moving back to our screen over here, the next tab is the backup and restore. So I already touched on this a little bit from the server perspective, but you also have the ability to configure backups and restores on an application basis. Now the schedule that you set in the server tab is going to apply to all of your applications, but what you can do is take a real-time, on-demand backup, and if you have some available, you can click restore. So let's take a backup right now because, this isn't going to back up until basically tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and do this right now. So now that backup has completed, if I click on this tab here, then this would be the list of all my available backups. I simply click on this, restore the application, and this backup restore function works beautifully every single time. I've had to do this a number of times and go back multiple backup versions. I actually change my servers to backup for 4 weeks every single day, so I have a really long list of all the backup options. I want to have that available just in case something happens, and the backups do work really reliably. People always say you need to test your backups, and that's absolutely true. The next tab here is deployment via Git. This is not something that I personally use, but you certainly can take advantage of it. I'm going to skip past this and move into our application settings here. So I showed you earlier that you can change the varnish for the entire server, but you can disable this while you're working on one application and then re-enable it to kind of build back up that cache. All this other stuff I pretty much don't touch. I leave all this exactly as it is. And then there's other PHP FPM settings. You also have varnish settings, and that's about it. Really, the only thing I ever change in the application settings is pretty much varnish on and off, and that's it. The other thing you could change is the from address here for emails. After you enable Elastic, you could change this to like no reply at yourdomain.com. So in our case, it would be like no reply at formulameme.com, something like that. So it kind of matches the server. But because of Elastic Email, I pretty much never have to do this. And I use Gravity Forms, and in Gravity Forms, you can configure the from address for a given form. So Gravity Forms kind of overwrites the from address, and I guess this would be a good thing to do just to make sure it's consistent and you don't have any like weird looking spam, kind of looking email addresses. Migration Tools is a really sweet function. They have a WordPress kind of migration plugin that works really, really well. So the idea is that you install this on the website. You come over here to your Access Details tab, pull out your SFTP information, your MySQL information, and then it's going to clone the site into Cloudways for you, and it works really, really well, especially with Oxygen sites. Last but not least is the Cloudways Cdn tab. You can see it says you'll be charged $1 for 25 gigabytes of basically bandwidth. Any additional consumption is 4 cents per gigabyte. This is only something I've used in one site, which was a client that got traffic from all over the United States and Canada. And in that case, it definitely helped us with bandwidth consumption from the server, but I didn't really notice a huge performance gain, so I guess the main benefit would be kind of just reliability and bandwidth consumption. That is available if you're after it, and something that I've tested a little bit and was happy with. Lastly, I want to touch on the support aspect. So you can see over here, there's this need a hand button. If I click on this, then you can see there's some search topics, there's a knowledge base, and there's a live chat. Cloudways doesn't really have a phone support, but their live chat is pretty decent, I will admit. So you are chatting to people in other regions of the world, but they are typically very helpful, and almost never can they not do something for me. So sometimes I had an issue with like under application settings, my PHP settings were incorrect. Whatever I set wasn't taking, and the support team was able to do that for me. So although it is live chat, which is sometimes a little frustrating, it does actually work pretty well. For the most part though, I pretty much never need to contact support because everything just works. I never really run into any issues, and if I do, it's typically my fault. or it's some sort of like plugin conflict or some other WordPress related thing that's not really Cloudways' fault. So overall, I'm very happy with Cloudways. I highly recommend this as a web hosting platform. Whether you're an individual or you're an agency or a freelancer, it's a really strong platform that has all the features that you need. You have a team of server admins behind the scenes managing everything for you, from security and updates and all that kind of stuff. You don't have to worry about any of that. So again, that touches on my point at the beginning of the video where I was talking about this is more expensive than if you went directly to Vultr, but you also don't have to configure anything. You basically just deploy your site, do what you need to do, and you're good to go. You don't have to worry about the servers and all the behind the scenes stuff, all that mess that comes with managing a server yourself. In a future video, I'm going to show you guys how you can migrate your site into Cloudways using that WordPress migration plugin I told you about, so stay tuned for that. If you've made it this far, I really appreciate you watching, and thank you so much. I'll see you in a future video.